Welcome to Smaointe Sathairn, the Learn Irish online show which comes out every Saturday morning, in which I'm going to be talking a bit about the broader principles and ideas around learning Irish and hopefully giving you the tools to make it a lot easier for you to increase your level in speaking, listening, writing and reading in the language going forward. The odd numbered episodes, that's 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 and so on, are all going to be available for free on the Gaeilge Weekly feed, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and wherever else you might listen to the show. But to get access to the even numbered episodes as well, you'll have to sign up as a Learn Irish Online member. Patreon.com/Learn Irish Online to begin your free trial today. It's only €7 a month plus VAT from then on in, and you get access to a load of different shows, not just Smaointe Sathairn, but Ishtarish, Leirish, Ag Astrú, Button na Ró, Lífocht, Topic Breakdown, bonus episodes of Gaeilge Weekly, and so on. Links will be down below in the description. Very much hope you enjoy the show and get some benefit from it. Fáilte as chuig Smaointe Sathairn. Thank you very much for tuning in. This is episode number 7, and it's one of the ones going out for free on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and everywhere else on the Gaeilge Weekly feed. If you want to listen to episode 2, 4, 6 and the future episodes of 8 and 10, you can sign up as a Learn Irish Online member over at patreon.com/Learn Irish Online. You can even just sign up for a free trial, listen to all the even numbered episodes on the free trial, and if the rest of the membership is of no interest to you, by all means cancel. We always say at Learn Irish Online, we don't want people spending money on something they're not going to use or they're not interested in. But while you're over there on the free trial, do have a look around at all the different things we have to offer LIO members. But today I wanted to speak a little bit about getting more Irish in your life. So to set up firstly what I mean by this, I suppose you can look at things in terms of active or formal study and passive or informal study. So let's just call it active and passive for the sake of today. And that's a bit ambiguous, which is which. So certainly active study, I would say if I sit down and listen to a podcast or a TV show, and I'm kind of very focusing in on the Irish and I'm reading the subtitles, maybe even pausing and checking a word every so often, and kind of very much doing it for the Irish and that being the main thing, then I'd describe that as active study. Any lessons with teachers, very much active study. Even if you meet up with a friend and just chat to them in Irish for an hour, I would kind of include that maybe in active study as well. Certainly watching a YouTube video, listening to any of my content or watching any of my content or any other of the great Irish language teachers out there online or in person, that's certainly active study. But, you know, that might take up, maybe you have a schedule and you do 25 or 30 minutes of Irish, whatever type of practice it might be per day. Well, if you're awake for 16 hours a day, that still leaves about 15 and a half, not to go too deep numbers, but it still leaves a big portion of the day, big portion of your week, big portion of your life, not free, because obviously you're doing other stuff, but that kind of is the point, that it leaves it without stuff going on in Irish. Now, some people, what they do, they try and find a solution to this and they say, oh, I'll just study more. I'll do an hour a day, 2 hours a day. But quickly you'll become, unless you're really, really into language and you have a lot of spare time in your hands, you'll become a bit burnt out by this. You'll stop enjoying the practice as much, like anything. You know, cake is great once every few weeks, but have it every day, every meal. You get sick of it pretty quickly. Even something that I hope is enjoyable for you guys in terms of speaking, listening to Irish and learning more about it and about the structure of the language and so on, whatever aspect of the language you're most into. I'm sure it's fun, but you keep on doing it again and again and again, and at some point it won't be as fun. So more active or formal practice isn't necessarily the answer. And I've spoken about Smaointe Sathairn. Sometimes you need to be honest with yourself and say, well, am I actually doing enough? I say I'm learning Irish and we identify almost as someone who is learning a language, but ask yourself yesterday, for example, and none of this, oh, well, yesterday was this or was that or this, I was there, I was traveling or whatever. Yesterday, no, nothing more, nothing less. How much practice did you do? Or did you feel going to bed that you were able to speak and understand the language at a better level than when you woke up, even if it's just by learning 1 or 2 words? So sometimes people do need more active study, but most people need more passive study or passive practice, if you want to use a less academic word, let's say, because study, we can sometimes think of it as a chore, I guess, and something we don't want to do, and negative connotations in school and college and the rest of it. So what do I mean by passive practice? Well, I want you to think firstly about the amount of language we interact with during the day. For most people, if you're living in Ireland and English is your first language, then most of this kind of language interaction will be through English. So just think about today, for example, how much we interact with language. Just a few ideas. In terms of reading written language, anytime you open your phone, you're dealing with written language, the names of apps, going into website, going onto ChatGPT, going onto Google, reading different stuff, reading the news, again, navigating the phone, going into settings, whatever it might be. Same thing when we're on social media. If I took away all the language within social media, even just the written language, and I kept the audio there, it would still look so weird. So you don't even realize every time you're opening Instagram, you might be reading 1,000, 2,000 words if you're scrolling for a few minutes. As well as that, there's books, of course, or your Kindle, your ebooks, whatever it might be, as well on when you're on the laptop. If you spend 2 or 3 hours working on the laptop, the amount of words you see, the amount of interaction there is with language. I have Audacity open as I record this podcast. There's so many words on the screen. Thankfully, most of them are in Irish, and this is, you can see where I'm going to be going with this. I'll return to this in a few minutes and tell you what words are up there, because I've changed most things on my laptop as Gaeilge. But as well as that, aside from the written language, listening and watching. So I suppose watching people speak Irish, but more so listening to it. We don't want to have the TV on mute. Anytime you open up YouTube, you're listening to, again, a language, whatever language it might be. So it might be in English or whatever your first language is, or wherever you live. Let's say in Spain, a lot of the stuff I'd see in my phone will be Spanish and so on. Anytime you open, again, social media, you're going to reels, stories, the music you're listening to, you're interacting with language there. Most songs have vocals in them or have some type of spoken word in. Anytime you turn on the TV, anytime you turn on the radio, anytime you turn on podcasts, you are hearing people speak, essentially. Same thing with writing yourself. Probably this is something people do less nowadays, but still, writing notes, physical notes around the house, in notebooks, anything you do on pen and paper, you're writing, and I presume you're writing in a language, unless you are doing mathematics. Everything else really is via language. Anytime you're writing a shopping list, you're writing a document for work, you're sending an email. So there's so many different things. Those are just a few random ideas, but we're constantly interacting with language. At the moment, listening to this podcast, you're hearing me speak. So you're hearing someone speak, you're hearing someone speak a language. To navigate to this podcast on Spotify or Patreon or Apple, you encounter a load of language, you kind of automatically know it, and you can probably get to this podcast without even thinking, or any podcast on Spotify now, because you're so used to using it. But you are actually encountering a load of language as you go through the app and hit search. And then where it says type into search bar or whatever, you hit that, and then you're typing it out yourself. So we're constantly, I'm just trying to reinforce the point here. Sorry if it's getting a bit boring, but we're constantly interacting with language. So the goal for me, or one of the ways you can massively help yourself with a language and also make yourself feel like the language is something important to you, is, let's say at the moment, for a lot of people listening, you, out of all that language you're encountering every day, 100% of it might be in English. It might be different for some people. So let's say 95% of it might be in English, 5% of it is in Irish. If you're just someone who grew up in Ireland who is learning Irish now or relearning it post school. So for other people, let's say for me, mine might be 50% English at the moment, 20% Irish, 20% Spanish, 10% Italian. Okay? For someone who's living abroad or learning a language, whatever, there might be a difference. But for most people listening, I'd say you're 95% English and then 5% Irish, or 95% other languages and 5% or 10% Irish. And probably most of that Irish is coming through formal active practice, where you're sitting down, you're specifically listening to podcasts to improve your Irish. When you're sitting down and watching one of my videos or one of my podcasts or someone else's, or you have your Irish lesson once a week or whatever else it might be. But what about the other 95%, the passive? Okay, all the things I listed off there, we can't change all of them to Irish. We can certainly change a lot. And so if you start going through it and think about all the different things, and if you're listening on Patreon, you can go to our new glossary that we have and actually check out the document Living Your Life as Gaeilge, or I think it might just be listed actually as list the Acfunny, list of resources, loads of different ideas, loads of different podcast shows. You can watch social media accounts, you can follow apps you can change into Irish, but as well as that, just different things you can be doing every day to have more Irish in your life. So let's go back through that list, a few ideas. So firstly, I was talking about reading and the written language, and I have apps as the first thing written down. A lot of apps, more and more all the time, on your phone and on your laptop can be changed to Irish, and they normally have pretty good translations. In terms of social media, let's say you can change X into Irish. You can't change Instagram at the moment, as far as I know, but you can change Facebook into Irish. Your email, you can change Gmail and Outlook into Irish. A few random websites as well, such as Airbnb, possibly Booking as well, but certainly Airbnb, you can change into Irish, and you'd be amazed, even if you're not actually booking an Airbnb, and this kind of brings it back, I suppose, into active practice, but doing something different like that, like pretending you're going on to book 3 nights in Rome or whatever, changing it into Irish, and then navigating through it and kind of going checking out the words you don't understand, and it can really stimulate your mind and kind of bring up new words that you wouldn't have heard. And it's nice to be using the language in that type of way for something practical. But that's more so, again, looking at the more active and the more formal practice. But on the passive side, loads of different apps that we can change into Irish on the phone, and different social media, different sites. Google I can change into Irish. If I look at my laptop here, the laptop is brilliant for different bits of software that you wouldn't believe. Have Irish Clipchamp, which is a really good video editor that I use for all my stuff, free video editor. You can get that completely in Irish, and it's completely free. You just change Irish in the settings, or if you change your laptop, while most phones can't be changed to Irish, the phone itself, most laptops can be. Okay, I think actually all 3 main operating systems, certainly Windows and certainly Linux, because those are the 2 I use, can be, whether Mac can be or can't be, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm 90% sure it can be changed into Irish as well on the laptop. So I have Audacity open, and instead of File, Edit, and then Select as the first 3 little bars, the top says COVID, Agar, Rowney. And then instead of View, it says Arc. Going down to the end, instead of Help, it says Cower, and so on. I have my mouse currently hovering over the big red button that'll stop this recording in about 10 minutes, and it says Jane Tafadu / Tafad Reen Nua. Okay, so kind of start again a new recording, or just record in general. So again, this isn't me, I'm not learning Irish, but let's say I had this in Italian. I'm learning Italian at the moment. So while I'm here making a podcast for people who are learning Irish, and I'm just doing my everyday job, I learned the word for record in Italian without even kind of trying to learn it, or without sitting down and taking a half an hour out to actually do some work on the Italian, which I also need to do. Obviously, this isn't as fast. 30 minutes passive practice isn't going to give you as much as 30 minutes of active practice will, but it's bringing up all these things. And it's also with Irish, I suppose one of the big issues for people learning Irish is they feel, okay, I want to learn this and I really want to speak it, but I kind of feel like it's just, like, I'm not actually going to use it that much. When am I actually going to... I have no ambitions to move to the Gaeltacht. I'm never probably going to live in an Ireland in my lifetime where it's the main language, and I can't just go into any kind of shop or in Dublin or Cork or Galway City or whatever and everybody will speak Irish. It's not like learning Spanish where I can go to Spain, spend 6 months in Spain, or go there on holiday a few times a year and be constantly using it, and not many people here have English and so on. Everyone, as far as I know in the world, who speaks a good level of Irish has fluent or very good English, certainly C1 or above. So sometimes it can feel a bit discouraging. But again, when you realise how many things in your life, again, going back to that 95-5 or 100-0 kind of split, if you can make that 70 for English, 30 for Irish, 60 for English, 40 for Irish, and put more and more stuff. I've only mentioned a few things. If you're a big reader, why not read more in Irish? Again, there's loads of different books out there at different levels. As I kind of said back on one of the early episodes, I believe it was episode 1, of Smaointe Sathairn, you need to make it enjoyable. So let's say if you're a reader, but you don't like fiction, like myself. Not that I have anything against fiction, but I much prefer autobiographies and non-fiction. Well, if I'm learning Italian now, why would I buy a book in fiction? Okay, even if it's an easier one to read, because I can buy a children's fiction book and the language will be easier, it'll be more on my level. But if I'm not going to read one in English or in Irish or one of my first languages anyway, why would I read a fiction book in a language that's even more difficult for me? Even if I was reading a fiction book in my first language, I'd find it difficult to stay focused on. So when I'm not understanding every third or fourth word, it's going to be even more difficult and I'm not going to enjoy it that much. So again, finding stuff which I appreciate with Irish is tougher than other languages. Again, Irish Italian as a comparison, a lot less books available printed in Irish than there are in Italian. But you don't realise till you really start going deeper into Sail na Gaeilge and the Irish language sphere or the Irish language world, how much stuff there is in Irish. It's unbelievable. And you're so lucky to be learning the language now than 10 or 15 years ago where there was so less. You know, I talk about, again, if you're on the Patreon, you can check out that list of resources of all different shows, podcasts, books and so on available for Irish learners. And about half of them, probably more than half, didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago. There was just Radio na Gaeltachta and T.G. Cahar, a few books like Harry Potter, kind of printed in Irish, and then not that much other stuff that was that interesting or exciting, especially for people kind of under the age of, let's say, 40, or even a lot of people over the age of 40 wouldn't have found Radio na Gaeltachta that exciting to listen to local news from the Kerry Gaeltacht and so on. So I think, again, looking at that and looking at all the different things that you can change into Irish and really sit down and think, don't just say, well, I can't change that into Irish. Oh, podcasts, I love listening to podcasts, but sure, I'm not going to be able to understand any of the ones in Irish. Well, look through all the different ones. Find one or two that, again, are, okay, you don't be able to understand all of it, not at all, but talk about stuff that are talking about stuff that you like and stuff that is enjoyable. And even if you can't understand it, why not have it on in the background? Getting the noises on your ear, feeling like it's a bigger part of your life. It's reminding you about Irish over and over again. So instead of this thing of, let's say, having one lesson a week and then 7 days between each lesson, let's say you have a lesson Wednesday evening and you have another lesson the following Wednesday evening, instead of leaving the lesson at 9 p.m. on the Wednesday evening and not having a single word of Irish going through your head for 7 days, again, it's constantly popping up in your head. It's reminding you about the language. You're getting pronunciation better. Whatever type of input you have is going to be good. Some input is more effective than others, but even if you have a podcast on in the background and you don't really understand it, it's going to help you with the accent. It's going to help improve your own pronunciation, the flow, and so on. So could we change? Again, I'm not saying change everything that you do in life into Irish, but you'd be amazed by the amount of things that you can change. The radio, if you listen to the radio, you've got Radio na Lifa, Radio Rerá, obviously Radio na Gaeltachta as well. So why not start changing some of them? Listen to a bit more of stuff on the radio. Again, if you don't listen to the radio in the first place in English or your first language, well then probably no point listening to it in Irish. But what stuff are you doing every day and how can we change some of that to be in Irish, to be as Gaeilge? Social media, think about the algorithm. We all know how the algorithm works. If you're swiping through Reels on Instagram, if you are such a person like myself who spends too much time on Reels, well, at least have some Irish in there. Again, just follow a few Irish pages. They'll come up when you're swiping through Reels. Spend a bit more time watching each one, even if it's not that good. Just once it's in the language, give it a like, maybe even a comment. The algorithm, honestly, within a few more swipes, will have something else in Irish. Keep on engaging with that. So again, 10 or 15% of the videos that are coming up on your algorithm are Ask Gaeilge. You know, be smart about it, be logical about it. YouTube, I've always said it's disappointing, and that's the one area where the Irish language really needs to improve. There's very little content on YouTube in Irish, and most of the content there specifically, again, for learners, which is good in a way, but as in it's specifically like my stuff, for example, breaking down the language and helping people to learn it rather than just, oh, here's a vlog for 20 minutes, Ask Gaeilge. There's some of that, but not as much. So YouTube is a bit trickier looking at the other stuff. Again, any notes you write on your phone, write them in Irish. Okay, it doesn't need to be every word, but the words that you do know and the words that you don't, check it at the end of the day, at the end of the week, and see what the translation would have been. So again, it's just constantly bringing up the language, shopping this. Why not make it in Irish? Great way of learning off all the food that you do eat and the food that's specific to your life and is relevant to your life. Work documents, again, that's just, I was thinking of that because I had Google Docs open earlier for something I was writing for work. So again, you might not want to, but if it's a private thing and you're not sharing with other people, then okay, you might not want to write the full thing in Irish and it might take too long. But why not even small thing? If you want to put the date at the top of the document, put that in Irish. You know, to morts, whatever, on Tainula is Fiha, Bialtana, Govit's Fe Kuig, put that up there. It might make you realize, oh, I'm not sure is May, Mehiv or Bialtana, but you can check that and then put it back again. Or, you know, there's loads of different things you can do, and all of this stuff is helping. And especially with Irish, it makes you feel like the language is an important part of your life and almost like you need it. You know, if you're scrolling through and 15 or 20% of your reels on Instagram are Ascoilga, you kind of do feel like you need the language in order to understand this stuff and for the app to be useful. Even if you are kind of forcing it a bit, then that's okay. And yeah, I guess replication, the things that you want to do. So why do you want to learn Irish? What level do you want to get to? I was thinking most people, when you break it down, want to get to a level where me and you could go for a coffee and we could just chat in Irish for an hour and it wouldn't be any hassle to you. So that means, again, I've talked about this on loads of shows before, including Smaointe Sathairn. Going back to episode number 1, I think I talked a lot about this. That means being able to express pretty much any idea that comes up within reason in some type of words. You don't have to have the exact vocabulary for everything. You never will. No one ever will. There's always words in a language that you don't know, even if you speak it to a good level. But being able to express the idea in some form. So maybe you're trying to say about a sports match, he hit the word work, and you don't know the word for word work, but you know the word for post, or the thing by the side of the goal, or whatever. Being able to express it without too much hassle. And the other half of that is being able to understand what I say. So being able to understand pretty much any speaker, unless they have a very extreme, very difficult accent or way of speaking. But as well as that, what other things do you want to do? Do you want to sit down and be able to understand Titi Cahar and Titi Cahar Nuacht? Well then, do it. Even if you can't understand it now, the only way you're going to get better at it is by doing it. As I've quoted before from a famous football manager, and I'm not even that big a football fan. I don't know why I bring it up in different examples on here sometimes, but it's easy, I suppose, for a lot of people to relate to. He said, it was Mourinho, he said, to be a great pianist, you don't run around the piano or do push-ups to make your fingers stronger. You sit down and you play the piano. So again, whatever you want to do, whatever it is you want to use the language for, do that, even if you're not at the level to do it properly yet. So if that's, I want to be able to listen to podcasts while I go running, ask Gaeilge and understand everything, go running and listen to podcasts, ask Gaeilge. Why? Because again, you might not understand everything, but you'll move closer, you'll keep on taking steps, and it'll keep on helping you get better at the specific thing that you want to do. So again, to recap, the main idea there, think of the difference between active practice and passive practice, if you want to phrase it like that, or formal and informal practice. Think outside of your maybe half an hour of practice a day or however much you do. I'm not saying that's too much or too little or the perfect amount. It depends on what you do, your schedule, how you're doing it, and so on. But look at the other 15 hours a day, let's say for example, that you're awake, and say, well, think of all the times I'm interacting with language. How can I make 10, 20, 30, 40% of that in Irish? Sit down, even throughout the course of the day, write down as you go through all the different things you interact with that included language. It'll be a long list. At the end of the day, how many of those can you change partially or fully to Irish or whatever language you might be learning? So that is it, guys. Hopefully that made sense. Very much appreciate you listening to this episode of Smaointe Sathairn. If you ever have any feedback on the show or anything about the membership or Learn Irish Online, you can get in contact with me at liam.learnirishonline@gmail.com. And as I said, all episodes, including the even numbered episodes, are available over at Learn Irish Online membership. That is patreon.com/Learn Irish Online. Be back again in 2 weeks if you're listening on Spotify, or 1 week if you're listening over on the membership. Do check out the other 6 episodes of Smaointe Sathairn. A lot of other tips and advice I've picked up, I suppose, after years of teaching the language and making content for people who are learning the language. Gurmina Magi, Slán agus Bannacht.